How's it going, everybody? This is Alex Caceres, and you're listening to Story of the Fight.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Story of the Fight. I am Will. Ramiro is out again today. It's the holidays, and the boy is busy, but we are still going to do an episode today. Obviously, no UFC, so we will be covering Usyk versus Fury 2, and then some of the fights from One Friday Fights 92. But before we do that, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. If you don't want to listen to us or watch us on YouTube and you just want to listen, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, anywhere podcasts are found. Follow us on socials: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, Twitch, Blue Sky, anywhere you can find socials. Story of the Fight. Go to storyofthefight.com. It'll list all of our socials. You can click through and follow. But the main thing, I think, is here on YouTube, where we go live every Sunday, which is today, which is why we're live. Let's see. So we can go ahead and get right into it. Let's see. We had Usyk versus Fury 2, the rematch. The first one was dramatic. Usyk handed a big loss to Fury, hit him with a big shot, hurt him, almost had him out of there. This is the anticipated rematch. Fury walks out pretty much like Santa Claus walking out to Mariah Carey, because his walkouts are always crazy and fun. He's a character. And then we had Usyk, who is also a character himself, but he walks out as like an actual warrior, and you're like, damn, I think Santa's about to get his ass beat. But it was a good fight. It was a lot closer than the first fight. I think there's a lot of people saying that it was a robbery. I think that might just be some fan bias. Usyk beats him by decision, unanimous decision, including the AI judge, which we'll talk about, because they made a big old stink about, we're going to have an AI powered judge, and it's not going to impact the decision, but we're going to find out how we can fine tune this thing and see if it's accurate, and maybe solve this judging problem by replacing them with robots instead of just replacing them with people who aren't corrupt. But yeah, it was a great fight. Going into this, Fury put on like 20 pounds or something like that, 15 pounds. He weighed in at 281, I think it was. I should have this pulled up. He outweighed him by like 25, 30 pounds or something crazy like that. Usyk weighed in, well, more than that. Usyk weighed in at 226. Fury weighed in at 281. So much bigger. And going into that, I was like, okay, hey, shout out Chester. Thanks for joining. We're going to cover Usyk Fury for a bit, and then we'll skip over to One Friday Fights 92. But yeah, going into this, I was like, well, the first fight, Fury, you never really know which Fury you're going to get. You're going to get the fleet-footed, head movement, fighting on the outside, jabbing you with that weird rhythm, Fury, or you're going to get that Kronk style like he did in the Wilder rematch where he just ran through him, or you can get old school Fury where he just hangs on people because he's so big. He's like 6'7" or something crazy like that, 280 pounds, and he really wears on guys in the clinch. So in this one, him weighing in at 281, and the first fight he was that fleet-footed Fury, and it cost him. He ended up. You can only do that for so long against a guy like Usyk. You can't slip everything, and he hits so hard, but in that southpaw stance. So you're like, that's kind of what cost him in the first fight, and because he did get cracked, and there was that big moment where Usyk had him hurt against the ropes, and that's kind of what it's kind of what hurt him in the first Wilder fight, because that's how he fought Wilder the first time. And while he pretty much outclassed him for most of the fight, he got dropped a couple times, and that's what ended up making it a draw. Because you have to be, if you're going to fight like that, you have to be perfect the whole fight, and it's impossible to do that at this level. So, okay, same thing got him in trouble in the first fight against Usyk as the same thing that got him in trouble against Wilder in their first fight. So what did he do in the response to Wilder? Was he got the Kronk style, he walked him down and just bulldozed him. Instead of fighting off the back foot, slipping all these punches, he just ran right through him. And he weighs in at 280 this time. You're like, okay, is that what he's going to do to Usyk? I didn't think so. I thought he was just going to be heavy clinch, hang on him, make him hold him up, tire him out, and then try to outbox him that way, like he did a lot for the majority of his career. And he didn't really do that either. Uh, he did shore up a lot of the defense flaws that he had in the first fight. Um, Early on, I thought uh, instead of just moving around and slipping outside of his feet, he did a good job of keeping his feet underneath himself and shelling up. And his defense looked pretty good early on. Um, I thought he won the first 2 rounds. They were super like razor close rounds, but I thought he won the first 2 rounds. And then Usyk kind of started chipping away, going to the body a lot, which obviously you're going to go to the body against someone like Fury. He's so tall and he's so much bigger than you. And if someone is elusive with the head movement, yeah, you bang him to the body because you can't move the body like that. So he did a great job of going to the body of Fury. I thought he took rounds 3 and 4 back, so it was split after the first 4 rounds. Um, Momentum on Usyk's side, and then I thought Fury had a good round 5, like a really good round 5. That was like the best round of the fight at that point. Um, he cracked him a couple times. He wasn't throwing the uppercut like he was in the first fight. The uppercut is good against a shorter fighter, and Usyk going to the body a lot and dipping a lot, and you see him hop down or load himself, feinting like that, ready to jump in, and he doesn't. And sometimes he does. That's a great weapon against that is the uppercut. But Fury wasn't really throwing it, and I'm assuming they thought, hey, we had so much success in that first fight with the uppercut. I bet you Usyk's going to be game planning around that uppercut. So let's not give it to him until the second half of the fight, because then he'll be locked into how the fight is going, and he won't be thinking about the uppercut like they game planned against. Then we catch him off guard halfway through the fight, and I think even Sugar Hill called for it in like round 6 or 7 or something like that. Finally, so maybe that was the game plan. Don't be too predictable and just go straight to the thing that you had success in the first fight because it's a different fight now. Um, but round 5 was a big round for Fury, and then round 6, Usyk took it right back from him, and that's a big deal. You can't let somebody get momentum. Once the tide shifted, right? Fury steals, kinda edges out rounds 1 and 2, Usyk takes 3, then 4, and you're like, "Oh, no, is this gonna be the building of momentum for Usyk?" Fury changes it back at round 5, and you're like, "Oh, shit, that's gonna be hard to then." He already came back after round 2, 1 and 2. Can he come back from round 5? And he does. And at that point, it's really hard if you're Fury to steal the momentum back again. Momentum changes are not common in fighting, especially at the high level. Uh, well, I guess more so at the low level, but it's hard regardless, no matter what level you're at. Um, but Usyk did it at round 6. He took it back, and then you're like, "Oh shit, is Fury going to be able to rally behind this?" No, he wasn't, because after round 6, Usyk kinda started just gaining distance on him. He round 6, round 7, round 8, round 9. Actually, round 9, I might have give it to no, I didn't. I didn't give round 9 to Fury. It started getting closer in the last few rounds, and Fury did find that uppercut, but one of the big differences is Fury still was fighting on the outside. Usyk has he has tremendous pressure, and I would have liked to see Fury. It'd be interesting to know. I didn't watch any of the post-fight press conferences or anything like that, but um, I think the game plan could have been heavy clinch, hang on him, wear him out, and instead he still kind of fought on the outside, and that either was the game plan and fight on the outside with better defense instead of more solid defense, I should say, rather than slipping and using head movement as your primary defense. Uh, Or it was Usyk that forced him to fight like that, and with his pressure said, "I'm not gonna let you come forward. I'm not taking a step back. I'm not gonna let you Kronk style me like you did Wilder in the second fight. I'm not gonna let you hang on me like you did in a lot of your previous career. I'm going to be taking it to you. Good luck." And maybe Fury was forced to fight, not necessarily, I guess, still on the back foot, but just on the retreat for a lot of the fight. And you see some of the things that did that and forced him to fight like that is Usyk going to the body so early and often, and so did Fury. Fury went to the body a lot too, um, partly because Usyk's defensive shell up top is so good. He's so defensively responsible. He doesn't really open himself up for anything crazy. And obviously, there's the Southpaw Orthodox matchup which Fury fought a lot more southpaw in this fight than he did in the previous fight. And something that does is takes away the rear hand when you're in the open stance matchup, right? If you're Usyk and you're southpaw, that big left hand, your rear power hand, there's a slot for it against an orthodox fighter because he doesn't have to get past the shoulder, um, the lead shoulder, that is. So by Fury going, and that's what hurt him in the first fight. So by Fury going southpaw pretty frequently in this fight, that closes up that lane for the big left hand of Usyk because now he has to get past that lead shoulder. If I'm southpaw, the punch is coming from this side. If I'm orthodox, it has all this real estate here, this open side of my body uh, to come through. And he took that away by going southpaw. Um, so, like I said, he was a lot more defensively responsible in this fight. The problem is he was stuck defending a lot of this fight. And when he would go, it was almost like it was because of a bait from Usyk. Usyk would open himself up to draw something from Fury. He wasn't there for the shot, and then he would counter with multiple punches. And that was like the big, if we're going to do the story of the fight, I think Usyk being first and last was the majority of this fight. Fury was throwing stuff out, but it wasn't landing. He was I would like to see the striking numbers, but his percentage must have been pretty low. His output was high, but his percentage landed was pretty low. Whereas Usyk, sorry, his output was also very high, but I think he had probably landed like half of his shots. Um, and part of that is going to the body a lot. It's a lot easier to hit Fury to the body than it is up top. But with Fury shelling, you'd see Usyk go to the body, he'd shell, and then he'd counter Usyk's attack to the body, which is, traditionally a lot of the time, if you're throwing straight punches to the body, is to draw out like a lead hook from your opponent as a counter, and then hey, if I go to the body, they're gonna hook me, and I'm gonna come up and counter that hook. And that's a lot of what Usyk was doing. He'd go to the body, Fury would throw the hook as a counter. Usyk, knowing he's throwing the hook, would then come back up and go to the head, or he'd go back to the body and then the head. There's a lot of times where he'd go body, body, head, you know, just punches and bunches. Whereas Fury was throwing, if he was throwing combinations, a lot of it was like two punch combinations. A lot of them were doubling up the same punch, which is sometimes really good, especially if you're trying to cover distance. That double jab, you can get someone to retreat. Usyk doesn't really take a step backwards though. Um, so I think a lot of the time it was just that volume from Usyk going to the body, going to the head, having like 4 or 5 punch combinations where Fury's just throwing a couple. It's just, it's not going to work, especially if it goes to decision. And towards the end of the fight, I think Fury probably knew, hey, I need to finish here. And he was a lot more aggressive. He's throwing the uppercut now, which was landing well a couple times. I thought he edged out probably the last round, maybe the last 2 rounds. I think I gave him the last round. I gave Fury rounds 1, 2, 5, and 12. I think 11 is probably arguable. A lot of close rounds in this fight. It was a pretty close fight. But yeah, unanimous decision for Usyk. So he beats him twice. So like I said, some people are calling robbery. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think it was a robbery at all. Um, But yeah, and now they're talking. They get in the post fight interview. They got Dubois in there. Dubois beat Anthony Joshua. Commentators are talking about Usyk potentially retiring because there's no one else for him to fight. I get it. He's done so many rematches, but that's kind of just the state of boxing, right? It'd be crazy if he retired. I would think that's stupid. Fury, I think they'll probably do the Anthony Joshua fight, um, which sucks because a lot of time in boxing, they're starting to get better at it right now, but a lot of time in boxing, you get these high profile fights that just don't happen because there's so much politics and management does weird things. And, there was a point where we could have done Fury Joshua and it would have been insane. Absolutely insane. When Fury came back and he beat Wilder, or well, he didn't beat him. It was a draw, right? Um, and man, that was the time. And Fury won that fight. I thought that was actually a robbery, the first Wilder fight. I see how they got to a draw, but I thought that was dumb. I thought it was clearly just, hey, let's make this a draw so we can capitalize on his crazy fight, and we'll have a second one. And then they ended up having a third one, which is also very unnecessary, but ended up being the best out of all of them. But that was when the lightning in a bottle, Fury versus Anthony Joshua, would have been absolutely insane because it was Fury coming back from his hiatus. He looked like a fucking he put a masterclass on Wilder despite getting knocked down, but then he got up from that knockdown, and that was the time. He would have unified all the belts with Joshua, and now we're going to be getting it where Joshua's coming off the losses to Usyk. He's lost his belts. Yeah, he beat Francis Ngannou, but okay. Fury, he has like 3 losses now. It's just not as big as it could have been, and that's kind of the history of boxing this last couple decades where we get Mayweather Pacquiao finally, and they're like old dudes. Shout out Blunderbub. Third Muay Thai / kickboxing personal training done, and I am fucking tired, dude. It takes it out of you, huh? It's like the most tiring thing in the absolute world. But yeah, that was Usyk versus Fury 2. Let us know how y'all had it. I think, like I said, some people are saying this is a robbery. They thought Fury won this fight. I think maybe commentary had something to do with that. And then, yeah, it's just I thought it was very clear Usyk, and I thought going into the decision, I was like, man, if boxing fucks this up and they somehow give it to Fury or they make it a draw so that they can do a third fight, I thought for sure that was happening as they're reading the decision. But then all three gave it to Usyk. I think I think all of them gave Fury one more round than I did, but they got the decision right. And then the AI judge got it right, but let me pull up what the AI judge got because they scored like 2 10-10 rounds or something. They're just like, "What the fuck, dude? That's gonna need some tweaking, huh?" I know some people are, like, super stoked on 10-10 rounds, and they think they should be given more often. Uh, I don't know. I think 10-8 maybe should be more, you know I think 10-8 rounds should be more common than, um, 10-10 rounds. Boxing, it's a little different, but, with boxing, you get 12 rounds, you can have some of those big gaps. In MMA or something, when it's 3 rounds or 5 rounds and you get one 10-8 round, it really throws the entire thing. Boxing, you can get away with it a little bit. Let's see. Okay, we got the so first round 10-10, last round 10-10. Uh, it had it 118 to 112 Usyk. So at least it got the opponent right, which ultimately I guess that's what matters. I guess it doesn't really matter the scorecards at the end of the day. All that really matters is the right person gets the decision. Shout out Genevieve says, I'm up, I'm awake. I got too used to you doing a later time slot. Yeah, we've been all over the place. It's hard with the holiday season, just with our jobs. But as we get into next year, we'll get more back into the this time slot, 9 a.m. Pacific. I think it's better. It's closer to the event. We get the whole day after. And then shout out Anonymous for joining. AI judging is interesting. I wonder if it can learn it to judge MMA and Muay Thai. I think yeah, they didn't really talk about how at least not from what I saw, they didn't talk about um, how it's calculating things. Like I said, it got the decision right. I don't know if it's just doing, the numbers. If it's just the numbers, then like that's not going to work. Um, They'll have to put weight into things like control with MMA. I think Muay Thai, it'll probably have a little bit of an easier time just because it's closer to boxing. Once you get grappling in the mix, it's kind of it gets weird. It's because how do you favor top control doesn't necessarily mean you're winning if the guy on bottom is throwing up submissions and things like that. At least in my opinion, some judges have that differently. But like I don't get how it'll be able to score effective grappling. Uh, But I guess we'll see. I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure some organization will do it sooner rather than later, especially with this on such a high profile event. Um, I don't know what this weird image is. The fourth judge AI scorecard right here. Uh, like, what the fuck is that? Is that just like some AI generated dude? And that's like the guy that's supposed to be, that's the AI judge? Like, what are we doing with that? Just make him like a robot or something. Give me Sonny from iRobot. Is that his name? Alan Tudyk's character? Blunderbub says PFL already has it. Uh, yeah, maybe. I don't know. PFL. I usually watch PFL on mute if I'm being honest, and then I just watch the fight and I don't really care about anything else because there's so much of it. It's like, oh, fight's happening. I'll tune in. As soon as the fight stops, I'm looking at something else because yeah, I don't like that production whatsoever. Um, but yeah, that was Fury versus Usyk 2. I think all judges got it right, including that weird fucking image of looks like Kyle Rittenhouse or something. I don't know what they're doing with that. But yes, that is Fury versus Usyk 2. And now we can move on to one Friday Fights 92. Look at that. Thank you, Rich, for the switch. Yeah, we're not going to cover the entire card, but we are going to cover obviously some of the big ones. So if you're just joining in now for one talk, thank you for joining. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Story of the fight on everything. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, Twitch, YouTube obviously is the way to go, in my opinion, but we are everywhere else. Yeah, this was going to be a pay-per-view, and then, oh, look at that. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Rich going crazy with the slides. um, but yeah, we had, this was going to be a pay-per-view, and then they changed it last minute, which, Merry Christmas, I guess. Um, so yeah, here we go. One Friday Fights 92. Sittichai versus Shadow. Big fight. It seemed like maybe there was supposed to be another main event because this ended up being 3 rounds, and maybe they wanted a belt on the line to headline this card, but then they couldn't make it happen. I know there's like huge fights coming up um, in January for one, and a lot of belts on the line in January. So maybe they were just like, hey, with those big cards, they got the big Russell Crowe card where they're filming his movie at. Um, Maybe they're like, let's just stack that Friday Fights 92. We couldn't get a belt on there because of these ones. We got Japan coming up in March. We got Qatar in February. Shadow versus Sittichai is a fantastic fight. Let's just make that the main event with no belts on the line. And then, it was always going to be a 3-round fight. It's not fair to make this a 5-round fight. So we'll just keep it 3. I think that's probably what happened, but who knows? That's just, you know, me talking out of my ass. But yeah, I was really looking forward to Shadow versus Sitthichai, and it did not disappoint. This fight was awesome. We don't have a ton of photos from this, just the ones from the website this weekend. But obviously, the big thing was the knockdown in this one. I thought it was very even. There was at no point where I thought Sitthichai was getting blown out. There was one moment where Shadow threw like 4 body kicks in a row, and the first 2, Sitthichai tried to counter with his big left hand. And then after that, he just kept banging to the body with that kick. And he just eventually Sitthichai was like, I got to back out of this. Like, I'm just getting blasted here. And at that point, I was like, oh shit, is the tide like fully turning against my boy Sitthichai? And then he didn't. He stuck with it, and he actually had a very good 3rd round. And yeah, to Genevieve's point, I did see a stray piece of gold confetti fall down at one point. I think they were planning about. Yeah, I saw that too. I think I even saw Ricky Sewell look up after that and be like, "Oh shit, are we about to have like a collapse of our confetti?" Um, but it was just the one. Chester says, "Has one ever done a 5-round non-title fight? I don't recall any off the top of my head. Not that I remember. Not that I remember. Um, but maybe they would have if they knew. It's weird to have a main event not be well, 5-round non-title fight. I guess Friday Fights has a lot of main events that aren't title fights, so maybe. But yeah, I would have liked this to be 5 rounds, especially because once you get that knockdown in a 3-round fight, like Shadow did, it's you kind of need a finish in a 5-round fight. You can start to edge things out a little bit, right? If you do 48 and then 9 times 3. Yeah, you can edge it out in a 5-round fight if you get dropped, but in a 3-round fight, no, you can't. So you have to, and like for anybody who doesn't know, you get a 10-8 round in one of the rounds if you knock a guy down. Then all of a sudden, if you lose the 2 rounds, but you get a knockdown in one, it's a draw on the scorecard. It's going to be a draw, but there are no draws in one Muay Thai. So it goes to who is closest to finishing the fight and damage and things like that. And ultimately, a knockdown trumps all in that regard because it's obviously the closest thing to knocking a guy out is a knockdown. So, yeah, if you can lose 2 rounds and just drop a guy, You can lose the whole fight pretty much, get outpointed the entire fight, and then but as long as you get a knockdown, you're gonna win that fight. So when Shadow drops Sittichai, you're like, "Oh, shit." Sittichai well, if you're rooting for Sittichai, you're like, "Oh, shit." Um, which I was. I do like Shadow, but Sittichai is my boy. And he couldn't get one. Not for lack of trying, Sittichai fights a lot on his back foot, and he counters a lot, and in that 3rd round, he was really going for it, and, just couldn't quite get it. But here's the knockdown. And, one thing if you're fighting Sitthichai, he's a southpaw, right? So, the left hand counter, especially, is going to be one of his go to weapons. Um, and hey, shout out Power Pickle says one should all kickboxing Muay Thai 5-round fights. That'd be interesting. I think 5 rounds makes it more dynamic, but 3 rounds, one really likes the action-packed Muay Thai. You see that because obviously the 4-ounce gloves, they separate the clinch pretty quickly in a lot of their fights. They want action, action, action. And 5-round fights, you tend to have slower rounds 1 and 2 because there's a lot of gas tank issues, right? In 5 rounds, you can conserve your gas tank a little bit in those first couple rounds because you have 5 full rounds to fight. And in 3-round fights, you can kind of go balls to the wall and not worry about your gas tank. Um, and that plays into what one wants out of their Muay Thai. So I could see why they wouldn't do that. But I do think the fights would be more interesting in 5 rounds. It just wouldn't be as nonstop action, which is what is gaining a lot of fans for one. But the knockdown, like we were saying, I'll share my screen here. Shout out one for letting us show footage um, from their YouTube. Also, shout out one for not making this pay per view and just putting it on YouTube. Um, and so obviously Sitthichai here on the left, he's a southpaw. His number one counter is going to be his left straight, especially against orthodox fighters like Shadow. And the same thing we talked about with Fury versus Usyk, the big left hand from Usyk has a slot here to go through. Whereas if Shadow had his right hand forward, like he was southpaw, instead that left hand would be competing with this lead shoulder. Um, which in an open stance it's not. Um, so here we go. We're gonna have Sittichai is going to pull counter. Sorry, not even pull counter. It's Shadow that pull counter. So Sittichai here is going to throw his left hand on the break of this little clinch exchange. Shadow's going to lean back, hit him with his right straight, which again has the same slot as Shadow's or Sittichai's left hand, and just crack him on the end of it. They'll go the left hand, bam, and then the pull counter with the right hand from Shadow is fucking beautiful. But in that moment, if you're Sittichai, you're like, fuck, I got to come forward. And, obviously he wasn't like 2 days from it. Shadow tried to capitalize on it, but Sittichai's defense is so good. And you might be like, well, how's the defense so good if we just watched him get dropped? But a lot of big uppercuts from Shadow there. But a lot of the reason he got dropped here is it's kind of a labored left hand. You see, here it comes, a little bit labored. Whereas Shadow's is so much sharper. And part of the reason of that is because the entire fight, Shadow was just banging him to the body with body kicks, big body kicks that Sittichai is forced to block. And, you just keep getting slammed with a baseball bat up against your hands. They're going to start filling with blood, being heavy. He throws that, which is his main weapon, that left hand. He throws it, but now it's a little bit more labored because he's just getting smashed with these body kicks. And Shadow's able to just slip it, rip him with the right hand of his own, with a straight shot of his own, and drop him. But it was a really high level fight. It was a great fight. Very close. Outside, like that knockdown was really what separated it. I think Shadow was probably ahead a little bit most of the fight. But Sittichai was right there with him. But yeah, and then from what I remember, uh I don't think Shadow even got a post fight interview. Did he? No, he didn't. Which is weird. Shadow, I think, can be he can be like a star for one. I think like he's already big over like in Asia. He's got he's got titles from outside of one. He comes to one, he has a slip up in his debut, but since then he's been razor sharp. I think he's really really good. From Chummy Boy says Shadow is ahead. I'm rooting for both, honestly. Yeah, they're both great. I like both these guys a lot. Um, and I think one has somebody here with Shadow. I think he's very skilled. He has power. You saw him. That was some slick shit. Knowing Sittichai is going to be throwing that left straight a lot. bang him to the body where he has to block it, slow that left hand down so that I can counter it later. And he did it perfectly. Um, you know, and for the US audience, I think some people are gonna see the name and be like, "That's fucking sick." There's some edgelords out there that see Shadow and they're like, "Fuck yeah, dude, capitalize on that." Um, but I don't know. I thought he was gonna get a contract here. I thought if you beat Sittichai in a main event on a tentpole card, you're gonna get a contract, but they didn't do it. Um, but yeah, Chester says beating Sittichai in the main event deserves an interview. Yeah, you would think so, huh? I guess not. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about on that fight. So we can move on. Like I said, we're only going to do some of these fights. Um, we are going to do Suakim versus Panrit because this was fucking awesome. This was a great fight. Uh, this is one of those fights where a lot of the times when I try to get people that I know like personally to watch one, people who watch UFC, they like combat sports allegedly. Um, they're like, "Well, I don't know anybody." And you're like, "Okay." But, like, if you tuned in for, you know, Dustin Poirier versus, Michael Chandler, which was a crazy fight, right? If you tuned into that, and you didn't know who they were going into it, but you still watched it, by the end of it, you're gonna be like, "This was awesome, and I'm gonna watch these next guys fight whenever I hear about it." You don't have to know them to appreciate the fight itself, right? You can watch 2 random dudes online fight and be like, "Damn, that was a sick fight." And for a lot of people, at least in America, that's kind of what this fight would be. Suakim versus Panrit. You're going to be like, I mean, people who watch one know these guys, right? But if you're trying to convert UFC fans and they see this fight, they're going to be like, holy shit, let me know next time these guys fight because god damn, this was good. Um, both of them refusing to uh, give an inch, really, because a lot of the times like in a fight, you'll see someone land a leg kick and they're like, I'm going to reset. And sorry again, there's only like a couple photos from these fights that we have for each of them, but um, you'll see someone land a leg kick and then they reset and they circle for a bit. Not in this fight. One person kicks, the other person kicks. One person punches, the other person punches. They're not letting anybody get ahead on that scorecard because if you think of like scoring a fight as the round goes on, you think, okay, this guy just landed a shot. That gives him a little bit over this guy. Oh, this guy landed a shot. They're back even. This guy landed a shot. He landed another one. He landed another one. This guy landed one. That's kind of how you're supposed to score, like as the round goes on. So if you're fighting and you get hit with something, even if it's not clean, that's a little bit of a step up for that other guy. And this fight's a perfect example of just not letting someone get ahead on the scorecards and just if I take one, I gotta get one back, and I'm doing it immediately. Like they're not thinking about it. That's just ingrained in their skill sets to do that. Um, just big shots from both guys. I think Suakim dropped him with a jab at one point, nice power jab. His left hand the whole fight was fantastic, his lead hand. Um, and then eventually he gets the finish off a nice left hook. There was some miscommunication in the commentary booth where they were like, "It was a jab for the knockdown." And they were looking at the first knockdown, and then the knockout, they're showing it, and Mitch is like, "That's not a I don't think that's a jab." But then he kept calling it a jab, and you're like, "No, no, no, the first one was the jab, not the second one." Um, but because one is cool, we can show it. So let me just cue this up. There it is. So yeah, this is second round, 15 seconds left. Suakim is backed Panrit up into the ropes in the corner. He's teeing off on him. Big elbow from Panrit. Big left hand there, and that's the drop. That's it. That's the end of the fight. And you might be like, "What the fuck just happened?" Probably because I paused it halfway through at like the worst time. So let's go back and watch that again. It's just a nice short little left hook, and you see they're kind of in like a weird clinch exchange. Um, let me playback speed. Let's slow this baby down. So Panrit he's framed it off on him. Left hand, nice left hand there from Suakim. And you see here, this is the fatal mistake. In that same framing exchange, you see Panrit try to get that outside trip a little bit, and he's not really in a good spot to do it because he's lost the control up top. And I don't know if he was just trying to get him off balance and push him away while he was trying to trip him. Um, but in that moment, he kind of has to hop on this back foot here, and as he's hopping in to keep close to Suakim so that he could try to push him over that outside trip, that's when this left hook from Suakim cracks him just barely. It's fucking sick, dude, because a lot of the times, like what Panrit was doing is good, right? We talk about a lot recently about getting your opponent off balance, and like that can be half the battle. If you can get somebody off balance, you can land shots on them that you normally can't when they're defensively sound. But so it was a good idea to try to reach for him and hit that outside trip to knock him off balance. Um, but what ended up happening is he was off balance and out of position himself, while Suakim was able to just kind of hop back and use the hop back to put some torque into his left hook and crack him. So by trying to get Suakim off balance, he puts himself off balance, and Suakim's the one that's able to capitalize on it. There's the outside trip. He hops in, short little left hand from Suakim, and just puts him down. And there's probably some slow mo shots of this too that they put on the replay. But good for Suakim. I like to see him back in the win column. He's a dangerous fighter, man. He can be so dangerous. Let's see. Takes a while when you're in whatever I put it to 0.25 speed. So this was the first knockdown. This was the jab. Nice power jab from Suakim. Bam, splits the guard with that right on the chin. Splits the guard. Those 4-ounce gloves really can get through a guard. So he sets him down with that. That's the first knockdown. And here it is. Here's the frame, and you can see he's trying to get that outside trip here, but he can't. He loses the frame and goes for it anyways with his foot. Right here, tries to push with his hands, but because he's framing to try to hit that outside trip, his chin's exposed. Right, so he's extending his arms because he's going for that outside trip, and because he's extending his arms, Suakim's able to slot that left hand right through. And it's just a perfect shot. It's one of those shots where full speed in the fight, you're like, "What the fuck did he what landed?" It was such kind of an awkward position. Um, but a beautiful shot from Sua Kim. So he's got the frame, left hand comes through because of the frame, the first one, and then he goes for the outside trip and tries to push off with his hands again, but because he's extending and framing with his hands again, the left hand lands again, but this time he's off balance, he's off one foot and just fucking collapses him. But really cool finish, really cool fight up until that point. Yes, he was dropped. Panrit was dropped the first time, and then he got knocked out. But that does not explain like the real story of the fight. The whole story of the fight was Panrit was in there with him, and he was cracking him with some big shots as well. Um, it was very cool. Chummy Boy says Sua Kim still had the same defensive tendencies he's fall back to. Still though, I thought Panrit have a chance, but too much chasing for sure. Yeah, you know, chasing, there's a difference between pressure and chasing, and we'll talk about that in not the next fight but the one after. If you're chasing somebody, you're out of position, you can be off balance, and your opponent can capitalize on that, and that's kind of what happened here. And yeah, there's a couple times Suakim has had some trouble when he gets his back against the ropes himself. He's been finished there, but and Suakim got him there a couple times, but wasn't fully, or sorry, Panrit got Suakim up against the ropes a couple times. And I was like, "Oh man, is this going to be the same thing? Is Suakim about to get finished with the volume up against the ropes?" And he wasn't able to. Suakim was able to get out of that. Part of that probably is because Panrit was chasing a little bit more than pressuring, and not as much composure to hold him against the ropes and land those finishing shots. But yeah, very good stuff. And Chester, I was talking about earlier about watching a fight of two guys you don't know, and it could still be a good fight. He brings up it's exactly what happened with Ultimate Fighter 1 on Spike. They didn't know the dudes. Why doesn't it work like that for one? You don't even need a TV for fuck's sake. It's on YouTube every week. Yeah, I think, well, you know, Ultimate Fighter Season 1, I think it was like, what, 2005? Reality TV was like hot. And there wasn't all this competition for viewership like there is now. YouTube wasn't a big thing. Twitch wasn't a thing. Streaming wasn't a thing. It was just what's on TV. Spike was big. They have Spike was big. Reality TV was really big at the time. That was catching on. So yeah, it was like lightning in a bottle with the UFC with Ultimate Fighter. But yeah, so I think there's just so much competition now, and that's what's missing. At least with US viewers, I think one is getting a lot of viewership. It just when we talk about North American viewership, there's so much competition. But it is kind of that same thing. Anybody who turns into any Friday Fights card, not just the tent poles, if you tune in pretty much at any point of any of these cards, you're gonna be like, God damn, these boys are swinging. Like it's crazy. Part of it's probably time zone, right? Unless you know about it, at least I'm in California, right? In Pacific time, these cards usually start at like 4:30 a.m. I wake up for work and I'm starting to do my thing, get ready for work and stuff, and it's on my phone. I'm watching it because I know about it. It's it's not going to catch casual viewers tuning in randomly like Spike TV would in 2005 because of the time slot. And that's why, one has the fight nights now on Prime at the US time slot. I think a lot more people were watching that. Um, but it's not going to get that North American traction off of Friday fights, at least live, unless you know about it or know somebody who's like, hey, turn this shit on right now because this is some crazy shit. Um, but yeah, that's where we're at. We can move on. This is where we're gonna skip some fights. They were good fights. Sang Shonoi versus Yodnam Chai was very fun, but we're going to go into Panpayak versus Bikrev. Son of a bitch. We waited so long for Panpayak to return, and he's had a slow adjustment fight. Um, Man, he had an adjustment fight, and you're like, okay, it's his first fight back in a long time, but it's the guy, right? Like he'll be back. He just needs some tune-up fights, maybe needs some activity. So they give him Bikrev, and you're like, what the fuck? What are we doing? Why are we giving back one of these dudes from the Eastern Bloc? Chester says, yeah, you kind of gotta be a shit-eating wild man to watch fights while getting ready for work. Yeah, and I will not say that I watch them on my way to work because I will not say that. But there's some wild men out there. But yeah, Pampayak versus Bikrev. Um, I think we've seen it over and over again. You got a guy with a last name that ends with a V. Um, in these 4-ounce gloves, it makes a huge difference. And I'm not saying Bikrev only won this fight because it's 4-ounce Muay Thai and not traditional Muay Thai. But man, actually, he won this fight because of some very good awareness, vision, and the ability to capitalize on some things that Pompeiak was doing. Power Pickle says, "Why Pompeiak haven't fight for so long?" Well, there's a couple schools of thought. Uh, a lot of people think that he rubbed Chatri the wrong way, and because of that, they stopped offering him fights. Chatri said that they were offering him fights and he wasn't taking them. Uh, Chester says he was in one jail for some reason. No one really knows. No one knows the full story. Um, but he's back now, and man, this is a tough fight to watch because I mean it's just one of those things. He got a little reckless in this fight. He got a little careless. He had a cool setup where he he threw like a side kick to the knee, the lead knee of Bikrev. And this is another one, open stance matchup, Southpaw versus Orthodox, Pompey the Southpaw. He throws like a hopping side kick to the knee of Bikrev. Bikrev scoots out of the way, and as he's scooting back, Pompey throws a body kick, an open side body kick. And you're like, that's a cool combination. The problem is when you throw that side kick to the knee to scoot him back, they were already kind of at kicking range, and that would be really good if they were close and you could stomp on that knee to get him to hop back into kicking range, which then you can land that body kick off of the side kick. You go kick to kick, right? You make him scoot back into kicking range so you can land that big body kick. The problem is they were already kind of far apart, and Pampayak committed to this combination where he almost side kicked him out of kicking range and then threw the body kick anyways and followed up with it. And because he was so far out, Bikrev was able to just kind of absorb that body kick and then land a big shot of his own. So we can watch that here. Uh, Hopefully I timed it up right. But there's the side kick to the maybe it was more like a teep. I thought it was a side kick the first time I watched it, but he throws it to the bot or to the leg. Bikrev steps back. He throws this body kick, and Bikrev counters him. And it's a good shot. And Pompey's right back up, but it was a good shot. Straight through, turned him to the side a little bit. And it's a cool combo from Panpayak. It's just it seemed like Bikrev was aware of body kicks. If you're fighting a southpaw, Panpayak's like, "What the fuck? No, I slipped." But if you're fighting a southpaw and you're orthodox, you know the left kick to the body is going to be a big weapon for them because it's right to the liver. Um, so he's ready for it. You can see he's ready for it the whole time. He's not even worried about the body kick because he knows he can counter it with his right straight. And here's the body, bam. And at that point, it's the same thing we talked about with Shadow versus Sittichai. Uh, if you're Panpayak, all right, even if I win these next 2 rounds, I'm still going to lose this fight. I need to go at him. Um, and he paid the price. I don't think he got like overly reckless. I don't think that's why he got knocked out. Um, that was a slip there. Yeah, Chester says in real time, I thought it was a slip too. I didn't think it landed flush until the replay. Yeah, I mean, it was a good flash knockdown. And that's the thing too. If you counter somebody with that left straight off a kick, it's the same thing we talked about with Suakim versus Panrit. If you can hit somebody while they're off balance, if you can hit someone while they're either lifting their leg or putting their leg back down, it's a really good opportunity to knock somebody off their feet. And that's what happened. So we get into round two. Here's the shot. I'm sure they have the knockdown. There it is. Let's watch the slow mo. We might as well. Body kick. Bam. Yeah, it was clean. It was a good shot. Anonymous says back to Chatri jail for our boy Pompey. I don't know. I don't think so. I think he'll keep getting fights here. Um, but man, this was a tough one. Okay, here we go. Here's the finish. A little bit of a wild exchange here, and you could argue maybe that is because Pompayak is chasing a finish or at least chasing a knockdown because he was dropped himself. But they get into a mix here, and there's the knockdown, and that's ultimately the finish. And same thing live. I was like, "What landed flush?" I didn't see really anything land flush, and it was very similar thing where again he hits him in the pocket there. Pompayak goes for a body kick. Maybe it was a high kick, but he goes for a big power kick with that left kick, and it was the same thing that got him countered the first time. A little bit of a different situation with how it was set up and everything, but it was just a bad shot in that moment. The shot selection could have been different, but it's a big exchange, big wild exchange, and there you see him throw that body kick, and then Bikrev counters the left and a right, and then he hits him again there, and I think that's ultimately is what the finishing punch was. It wasn't necessarily the left hook. Left hook was big. We'll see it again in another angle, but I think Pompey thought I can finish this combination with this left body kick. He throws with a left hand to turn his body like that. As he's turning, he's like, let's follow up with this body kick. But he's so close that Bikrev's still in punching position. And like I said, if you can hit somebody while they're either lifting their leg or putting their leg back down, which is what is happening here, you see Pampayak still bringing that left leg down as Bikrev's landing that left hook right around the guard. That's what hurts him. He goes down, and as he's sat on the ground, that right hand right there is flush on the temple. And you see him just dazed. So we get the left hook. He's on the ground here. That's the shot. That right hand is nasty. And I'm not here saying like, oh, that's an illegal shot. He was on the ground. That's something that just happens in the mix, right? Um, so let's slow it down and see that shot because that was the left hook was flush. We'll see the left hook again. That's a good shot. Right behind the jaw here is a good spot to hit somebody. But you can see as Pompey's going down, it's not like he's out cold from that left hook or anything. Um, he's going down onto his butt. His guard is still up. He's not like unconscious here. And then this right hand right on the temple knocks his head sideways and he's dazed. And at that point, it's just too much. Um, yeah, at that point, it's just too much. And yeah, he gets the finish. And good for Bikrev. That's a huge win. Beating Panpayak, especially finishing Panpayak is a huge win. Um, and yeah, he moves on. Panpayak sits down. I don't know what's next for Panpayak. But yeah, here we will move on. We're going to skip some fights again. Two fights we're skipping, but they were very good. And Anonymous says, I'm just glad my girl Mexon shook off the ring rust and caught a clear win. Hope she stays active. Yes. We're not going to cover that fight fully, but we are going to talk about it after this next one. This next fight we're going to talk about is the last fight we're like covering. Um, and you'll see a theme throughout the episode with this next one. But we had Marat Grigorian versus Abdelali Zahidi. Anytime you can see Marat Grigorian fight, you should tune in because goddamn, this guy is a master. Um, and this one I didn't tee up any footage, which I should have because there was a finish in this one too. But yeah, big drama show in this fight. Grigorian, we talked about with Suakim versus Panrit. Um, the difference between pressure and chasing. Usyk versus Fury 2. Usyk pressuring. Panrit versus Suakim. Panrit chasing. Marat Grigorian versus Zahidi. Pressure. My God. Fighting Marat Grigorian must be exhausting. This guy stays in your face. He just walks you down the entire fight. And Zahidi was able to fight decently up against the ropes. Um, Partly because Grigorian throws so much offense. It's so constant with his combinations that you're obviously going to leave yourself open for some shots coming back your way. But he is so good. He's so good at heavy output while staying defensively responsible. And that's the difference between pressure. Well, it's part of the difference between pressure versus chasing is that while you're always going to give up some sort of opening if you're throwing a shot. The key is usually going to be to keep that opening as small as possible. And that's the difference between throwing like a tight right straight versus like a huge lunging right straight. And that's the difference between Sittichai versus Shadow. When Shadow threw that left straight, or when Sittichai threw the left straight, it was labored. And when we say labored, like there's some extra movement on it. And that extra movement is a bigger opening for Shadow to then slip and capitalize on. You try to diminish that as much as possible when you throw something. And Grigorian is someone to watch for that because, man, while he's pressuring you up against the ropes and he's constantly throwing to the body, to the legs, to the head, he's still very composed defensively and very sure. And it's hard to land stuff on him when he's pressuring you like that. And Zahidi was trying a little illegally. He ended up getting he got a hard warning. He got a point taken away because it's kickboxing and he's clinching. We didn't get Olivier Cost in this one to be like, no clinching. But we got plenty of no clinching from the ref. Um, Zahidi ended up getting, while he was, I mean, he's getting smothered up against the ropes. So he'd clinch and he'd throw a knee. And, you know, you can't do it. And so he ends up getting a point taken away because he kept going back to it. And I don't blame him in that fight. That's got to be your natural reaction to just grab this dude who's mauling me. He gets a point taken away. He does it again right after. He gets a yellow card. And you're just like, man, this is tough because, like, what else do you want him to do? Um, hey, shout out Ghost. Thanks for joining. Catching the tail end of this one. But one of the things that Marat gets the finish in this fight. He gets the knockout. And we can show it because again, one lets us. But let's look at this. So Grigorian again pressuring, heavy pressure, and one of the things he does so well is land these heavy leg kicks while they're close. It's not easy to do, when you're almost in clinch range. It's hard to land heavy leg kicks, but because he was the entire fight, you see a lot of the time Zahidi, and look at the defense from Grigorian. He's so defensively sound. Um, but you see here, he's anticipating the leg kick, which is good job here, good timing because Grigorian is throwing the leg kick here. But you see Zahidi raising that left knee to block the shot. He ends up going under it and kicking the rear leg, which is always really cool. But and there's the clinch knee, and he gets another warning. He says, "Dude, I will stop this fight if you keep doing this." Because at this point, he had a point taken away. He had he got the yellow card already. He's like, "Do not ruin uh Do not ruin this fight. Don't make me stop this." And Zahidi's like, "Bro, please let me. I need to clinch." Um, but you see here a lot of the time, because of the investments to the legs that Grigorian was making the entire fight, Zahidi ended up fighting the second round. A lot of it with one knee up in the air, anticipating these leg kicks and just trying to keep a guard from Grigorian. And what we talked about with, and look, when he finally comes back, you see Grigorian is just perfectly defensively sound. That knee was very borderline to being illegal again. But then on the break, you see Grigorian cracking with the big right hand. The ref's like, "Bro, please stop clinch kneeing." Um, but yeah, we have him up against the ropes, and you see his legs are so active, anticipating these leg kicks from Grigorian, and because of that, like we talked about with Suakim, like we talked about with Panpayak, if you can hit somebody while they're lifting their leg or putting their leg down, that's when you can compromise them. And because he's having to fight lifting his leg constantly, he's very open to some of these shots from Grigorian. And look at these guys trade. This was a great fight too. And props to Zahidi for throwing back because Grigorian is just fucking drowning. Um, But that's where he got a little careless. He throws a leg kick of his own, and as he's putting that back down, the right hand and the left follow up drops him. And props to him, man, because he could have sat this one out at that point. He was not winning this fight up until this point, and he could have taken it out there. And then here we go. They are immediately back to the corner from Grigorian. His pressure's crazy, and you see here he lifts the knee to keep it in between them, and that's when he gets the finish. It's a nice little left hand that finishes him right there, right along the jawline. But again, catches him with one foot up in the air. And a lot of that is because of the investments that Grigorian was making the entire fight, which is very cool to see such a pressure heavy fighter who's fighting you in the phone booth up against the ropes still land an overwhelming amount of leg kicks that force you to fight defensively irresponsible. So yeah, that was a very cool performance from Grigorian. Like I said, anytime he's fighting, people should tune in because he's a fucking master. Let me look at the chat because that was a long one. James says, "What's your opinion on Cost? Is he as corrupt as Jack Slack says, or is there another way of looking at it?" I don't think he is. I know, yeah, Jack always comes at Cost, but Jack Slack always has. He has like, I love Jack Slack, by the way. I pay for his Patreon. I love him. He has a lot of like long time running jokes, and he's very good at sarcasm and sarcastic jokes. And I think the same thing with like Shevchenko. He makes a lot of funny Shevchenko jokes, and people are like, a lot of people who don't like Jack Slack are going to be like, yeah, he always rags on Shevchenko, but part of it is a joke. And I think the Olivier Cost thing is a little bit of a running joke with him. I think there's maybe some truth to it from his perspective, but I think a lot of the time he leans into it a little bit extra. I do like Olivier. I think Olivier is good for one. I think Olivier or refs fights the way that one wants him to ref fights, and that might rub some people the wrong way. But ultimately, Herb Dean talked about it with the Sean O'Malley versus Marab Balashvili fight, where people were complaining about his stand-ups in that fight and standing Marab up. They thought, hey, it's a title fight, let him work, all these things. He came out and said, like, hey, if they want the fight to go another way, I don't mean like favoritism as far as the opponents and who they want to win, but an organization wants fights to play out a certain way, not for the win, but just for the duration of the fight. They want their fights to look a certain way. And Herb Dean kind of alluded to the fact that, I'm standing some of these fights up, like this Marab fight specifically. I'm standing these ground exchanges up because I'm under the impression of how the UFC wants fights to play out. Again, they're not picking a winner, but they definitely want their product to look a certain way. And Herb's alluding to that. And I think that's no difference with one. They want, their Muay Thai, and we talked about it, why they're 3-round fights rather than 5-round fights sometimes, because they want that all out action, all out action. And Olivier refs that tremendously, I think. I'm a big fan of Olivier Cost. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a good ref. I also think refing has so many openings for scrutiny against referees just because of the nature of what it is. There's so much room for error as a referee that there's always going to be something to point out and there's always going to be something to work on. Um, but yeah, maybe that's a long-winded response to that. Ghost says, "Does the UFC have the same thing one has where you can apply to use their content?" Um, does the UFC have that? Because every time we show UFC footage, we get pulled down. One championship, there's a um, I'll DM you, Ghost. I think maybe did I already DM you? No, I DM'd somebody else about this. I'll message you, Ghost, after the stream. Genevieve says, "I love when he started coaching him in the ring, yelling, 'Good, good job, good.'" Yeah, I'm assuming that's with the clinch knees or something like that. Blunder Up says obligatory obligatory rant about one kickboxing fixing kickboxing rules. Yeah. Hey, shout out Combat Sports today. Marat wants Super Bond next in Japan. Holy shit, that would be sick. That would be awesome. Yeah, because I mean, if Chingiz is gone, Super Bond's here, I would watch Marat versus Super Bond 100 times. So let's do it. Yeah, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about, we're not going to cover it in depth, but Mexen versus Kana. I think a lot of people thought Mexen was maybe done. So she loses to Pajija, no slouch. Then she loses to Jackie Buntan in the inaugural title fight. Um, and I think a lot of people were probably again, no slouch. Jackie's very good. Uh, Mexen had that time where she was out for a while. There was some, contract disputes maybe or whatever it was. I don't know. She was unhappy. She wanted different fights. She wanted whatever. Um, I don't know the behind the scenes of that. But she was out for a while, and then I think there was drama with the Stamp fight. They wanted Stamp versus Mexen, all this stuff. So we get Mexen versus Pachija for her like return fight, and I was like, damn, that's a tough fight to go back to. She loses, and then they're like, all right, here's Jackie Bouton. You're like, god damn. But that's what happens when you're that caliber of a fighter. You have to fight other top tier fighters. Kana gets her debut against Mexen, and I'm like, this is a great fight. Uh, it is so good. Um, And Genevieve says Mexen has either been holding back or lost a lot of her power. I think there's also just so much tape. There's so much fight footage of Mexen. Everybody knows how she fights. There's so much tape to study, and because she doesn't have that like one punch ending power, people are willing to. It's a lot easier to force the game plan that you need to beat her style, because it's less risk as far as like getting shut off. You can be a lot more aggressive against her to try to disrupt her volume and stop her from gaining momentum. Um, Plus, she's been doing it a long damn time. So that, you only get so many. But in this fight, Kana's big signing for one. This is her debut. She fights Mexen. Mexen was able to develop that and build and build and build and build and get the win here. Tough debut fight for Kana, but again, when you're that caliber, you have to. Um, but yes, we're gonna wrap this up. We're already past an hour. Um, Last one, James says, "Is that a disadvantage if there's a lot of tape to study on you?" It can be. It can be. That's one of the things that people talk about with Tom Aspinall is that he finishes these fights so quick that we don't know. There's still so many questions about him. If you have tons of 5-round fights, championship fights where they go to the distance, go to decision, there's so much to study. We know about this fighter, and we can start to close the gap a little bit. It's not like an obvious or like it's still, even if there's a lot of tape, if you're a great fighter, there's still so much to overcome. But it can be a good opportunity for somebody. If you're fighting somebody who has so much footage, you can really kind of pick out tendencies and things like that. So it's not like a huge disadvantage, but it can be. Depends on the fighter if they're able to take advantage of it. Um, Ghost says it's bad to be cynical about one as a promotion. I love the fights, which PFL is not doing well, but I hate the hyperbole, as with most promotions. The hyperbole is a bit much, but I'm willing to let it take a back seat because they're trying to get people to notice, and the hyperbole will reach some people. Uh, you know, Ultimately, all that matters for me is the fights themselves, and like you said, the fights are very good. But yes, let's wrap this up. We're an hour and 5 minutes. I thought this was going to be a quick episode. It ended up not being one, but thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. I had some good stuff in the chat. Hope you all enjoyed this stream, another solo stream, but we will be getting back to what we're used to doing. And um, there's not very many big fights left of the year. So we're going to start doing our awards, our predictions videos, um, things like that. So look forward to that. Hopefully, this upcoming Sunday, we'll be doing one of those. Probably the awards for the end of the year awards, knockout, submission, all that stuff. Fight of the year. Also, Christmas is next week. So Merry Christmas to all y'all who celebrate it. And if you're wondering who produced this episode, it's weird seeing just Will's face on here, but who's producing it? Who's making it possible? That's none other than Rich. But yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in for another week of Story of the Fight.